You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. If you are a regular member of our audience, we appreciate you every single time you tune in, and thank you for joining for another one of our brilliant interview series. And if you are a new viewer, if this is your first time watching Changing Reality, first of all, where have you been all this time? But second of all, welcome to our show. If you are new, you may not know this, but we have one of the best shows around here on WKHS Radio, just because we feature some of the most phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. So here on Changing Reality, we'll be hanging out and interviewing all kinds of amazing and phenomenal individuals with stories that will blow your mind. From social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, industry leaders, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, and many of whom have spent some time here on the Penn campus as well. And by hearing their inspiring stories on how they crafted their own paths, hopefully we'll be able to pick out little nuggets of wisdom that will kind of help us in our own journey as well. And this show is something that is very special to me. It's something that I truly believe in, just because I feel like there are so many people out there who do brilliant things and make waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm passionate about learning those stories of how they're able to change the world in their own capacity through just changing the world around them as an individual. And I personally believe that the power of stories is unparalleled in the ability to shape lives, to shape, the way we think about the world. And it has been something that has truly impacted me as well as an individual. So a little bit about me, your host for today's episode. I founded Changing Reality because I was an entrepreneur myself, and hearing stories of individuals and how they actually grew in their careers, in the work that they do, changed my life. I actually founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance that started back at home in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, but today collaborates with not just our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but over 28 countries to help provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So today we work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help them discover what they love doing, learn about themselves and the world around them, and even start their own careers while they're still in school that creates meaningful impact not just for themselves, but for those around them too. So to date, we've worked with over 35,000 students, 970 communities, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises run by students as young as 8 to 25 years old who are still in school. And the basis behind all of this has been stories. It's been kind individuals who've been willing to take their time out, share their lessons, share what they learned, and that's been able to create all of this change. So similarly, I hope that this show is that same platform for all of you, so that through the show, you'll be able to figure out a little bit more about yourself, about the things that you want to do, and the lessons that you can use to achieve that and shorten your own learning curve, as I said. So if you want to speak about any specific themes, topics, industries, let us know in the chat below. Or you can always, reach out on email and let us know what you want to talk about as well, so that we can help incorporate it into the show and bring the stories that matter to you onto your screen. So on to today's interview. Today we have someone who's truly phenomenal and who I think has seen the tech startup space from every different angle of the industry. We have with us Curtis, who is a partner at Third Point Ventures, who focuses on investments across the IT and data infrastructure landscapes. Previously, he was AVP and the head of corporate and investor development at Arista Networks, where he led mergers and acquisitions, including the Big Switch Networks and Awake Security transactions. Prior to that as well, he was an investor and corporate development leader for Intel Capital that concentrated on cloud, IoT, enterprise, 5G, and many other sectors as well in the tech world. He led operations and was chief of staff and technical assistant for the data center group's enterprise software division. And he joined Intel following the company's acquisition of Fulcrum Microsystems, where he actually led the business development division of that startup. And of course, he actually started his career in engineering roles at phenomenal organizations as well. And like many of you who are watching this, probably he also spent some time here on the Penn campus as well. So he actually holds an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and actually has a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Purdue University. So as I said, he has seen the tech and kind of entrepreneurial space from every element of it. And without further ado, let's hear the amazing story behind his journey. So without further ado, let's welcome our brilliant guest speaker onto our virtual stage.
Hi there, Harsha.
Hi, Curtis. How are you feeling today? Like, is
Great.
it sun shining? I can see it in the background. Everything
Yeah,
going on?
it's a nice day. I think February is already off to a much better month than the last month of January, which was, a mix of a lot of rain and crazy type of wind, and weather, power outages, you name it. So, but really happy to be here and to be speaking with you and your audience here on Penn Radio.
Thank you so much. I completely agree with the weather thing. I feel like every time I interviewed someone in January, I was hearing about like snowstorms and like downpours, and then now everyone's like, "Oh, the weather's great," and I'm terribly confused. So, all right, glad to know that you're also in this gang of watching the weather change behind you. But
Yeah.
I really was excited for this interview just because you are someone who I think, as I've mentioned in the introduction, has seen the entrepreneurial ecosystem from kind of every element of it. So I'm so curious.
Thank you.
Do you want to get into the tech industry when you were growing up? I don't think anyone grows up thinking I want to be a tech entrepreneur, like much, or I want to go into this particular industry. I want to be an investor. I don't think anyone can plan to do every single thing in an industry.
I
So how
know.
did you get started when you were a kid in school?
Yeah, I think I always had a strong emphasis into understanding technology, enjoyment in math and sciences more so. I think from going back into the early days and from high school, I was always probably more interested in like the technology focused areas of what was going on, playing video games, or I know were a big part of my life growing up too. So probably played a little bit of a part there in my interest along technology. But I think I'd probably have to, give my dad some credit there because he also saw early on. He's like, you do well in math, you do well in science. Perhaps you want to go down a path in engineering when you get to college. And so, at that point, like, sounds good. I'm not even sure what engineering is. So, but yeah, that's what led to going to college at Purdue University, along with trying to be a walk-on place kicker on the football team. So, which didn't happen, but it was a fun story to try to be a walk-on there.
Hey, like life's still young. You still got time. You never know.
I don't know if my leg is the same, Harsha. Yeah, and seeing Tom Brady finally retire, we're about the same age. So I think if Tom can't do it anymore, I don't think I should come back.
Okay, it's all right. We'll focus on the tech dream
Yeah,
then.
that was probably better. I'm glad I made that early decision at Purdue to focus on tech and focus on an engineering degree and not pursue some sort of life, young boy, kind of dream to be an NFL kicker. But
All right, I'll still hold you to it could have happened, but you know, like I feel like many people in university today, like they study something, but at the same time, it can be a little bit like challenging, when you're first like trying to be in that phase where you're learning, you're understanding, and at the
yeah,
same time, when you're new to college and university, everything is new, everything is tough, and everything is for the first time an experience. How was it
right.
like when you first got into college? Engineering is by no means easy.
I know.
And then, how did you start figuring out the ropes of that?
Yeah, because there's so many disciplines, right, and so many possible majors in engineering, and I think for me, at least when I went to Purdue, you don't have to be decided as a major entering Purdue engineering as a freshman. You're going to essentially declare a major at some point your freshman year, and I took some time, of course, like everybody, to really explore all these different types of engineering type of disciplines and schools. And what resonated, I think, most for me was what was going on in the market, and in the world at that time. The internet, really, I'm really starting to date myself, right? Is like I'm working, onto search engines on Yahoo at that time, or being being on a web browser back then called Netscape. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
Never heard of that.
so you're
Okay.
starting to like see, okay, technology is really starting to pick up. And so I think for me, this is an exciting place to be. The internet is starting to really, be something that is going to be obviously a big deal in the future. So I was very interested in both the computer side of it as well as like the electrical engineering side. I think I gravitated more towards in hardware, just from something that I can, physically touch and try to build too. So that's really what influenced me to choose an electrical engineering pathway.
Okay. And what about, transitioning out there, finding your space? I mean, good bet with the internet thing, like
Yeah,
definitely like that worked out well.
I
But
know.
how was it like when you first, finished university and were trying to figure out what was your next step?
Yeah, so I had selected a 5-year co-op program while I was at Purdue. So that was already starting to work, every other semester of work. Getting used to actually being, out in the real world, and that was something early on in my, in my life I got to experience. And what was, as mentioning, what was going on at that time was a growth in .com startups, a lot of interest in big tech companies and how they're transforming the world. So I had made a decision to really go forward with a discipline around microelectronics and engineering, and that ultimately landed an internship at Texas Instruments. And so that was a career path change right there, because my co-op wasn't as focused on microelectronics or that type of chip level design. And so I think that was another great career lesson. I think I feel like I learned is not to be afraid of like kind of switching gears, even at that stage of my life, saying, you know what, like this isn't something I'm really that passionate about or excited about, and made that change to go focus on engineering for chip design, and then landed a job with Texas Instruments as a summer intern there in Dallas, Texas. So, and that really opened up a lot of doors for me. So then when I was applying for jobs for full time, it was great to have a TI on the resume and the experience I had from the co-op programs. So I was able to find a few different roles at the time that matched what I was looking for. But ultimately, I was excited. I was really looking to move west and to really work in Silicon Valley. That was something I just felt like I wanted to be in the heart of, like where I thought all the growth in tech was happening. And so I landed a role with a company called LSI Logic and moved out west. But very challenging times though, because when I first moved into my apartment in San Francisco, I think it was like right around August of 2001. So we're looking at now, I mean, this is probably thinking, who knows what's going to happen, but clearly with post 9/11 and then everything really, turned to a major downturn into somewhat of a recession. It was quite a time to be working in Silicon Valley. I'd say there's some similarities now with a lot of what's going on in tech and layoffs and kind of that vibe, right? That 2022 was such a tough year, but hopefully things will continue to improve as we move on into 23. But for me at that time, it was learning to be working full time and experiencing what was going on at the macro level, and seeing, okay, this is going to change perhaps what I'm thinking about doing in the future too. So, which ended up happening because LSI had shut down different divisions within the company, and our division and our data center, or excuse me, our design center had shut down. So, two things there I probably would love to comment on. One, I had gone back to pursue, enrolled at Stanford for a master's in electrical engineering. So I thought like this is a great time to continue while we're kind of in this tough rut of an economy, to go back for my master's and work towards that. And that actually did pay dividends for me, because I was able to then transition into a new role very quickly at another semiconductor company and pursue a different part of yet a new role in product and move out of engineering. And so that was a great experience, just to have that, to move to a new job and work on new products, but still continuing on my master's master's program at Stanford.
No, that's amazing, and I'm very curious about that decision that you made, just because, as you said, there's so many similarities to things that are happening now. People's
Right.
entire divisions are closing. I think I read somewhere that the tech industry laid off close to 40,000 people in the last few weeks to months in
Yeah.
a way. So the main thing that I think people are a bit worried about is not that the people aren't talented or amazing in the work that they do, but
Right.
there's still a lot of fear that goes around, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. Did you ever experience this fear and uncertainty, especially at that point in time? And how do
All
you
the
manage that element of it?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, because moving out to California and like all of a sudden the market completely falls over, and then you're seeing all these layoffs. I mean, there was empty buildings up and down the 101 or the 101, excuse me, uh, because just from all the layoffs and just all the companies shutting down. So it was a really eerie time. So there's a lot of that clear uncertainty. Like, did I make the right decision with my career moving into, out here and out west? But, you just have to keep going, and you just have to know that things are always changing, and just literally just keep a positive attitude, as cliche as it sounds. But but I felt like if I continue on and go back to school, great things are gonna happen, and because I'm just going to have a better understanding about a really specific domain of expertise, and that really helps as you continue to pursue new opportunities especially within Silicon Valley, because there's so many different types of tech companies out here.
Today you're an investor and you invest in really the high tech space
Yeah.
for a lot of it. If you had to flash back to that period of your career in the engineering world, what do you think was the most meaningful experience that you had as an engineer, that today you draw upon the roots of that knowledge, if you do at all?
Yeah, I think the this is where I was really excited about learning more about startups and early in my career, and learning more about the venture capital ecosystem as well. And so I had friends and family also that were working within venture. And so I started talking to them about what are they doing? What's it like working in venture capital? How did they pursue such a career? Everyone had like a different path. Some were clearly moving from investment banking or consulting or finishing up an MBA program and landing associate roles or different types of roles. So for me, there was different types of learnings about, like, okay, career path there, to think about how do I move to this next level, because I'm really excited or really interested in pursuing a career that early and transitioning into venture. Um, for I had interviewed at a couple firms, and one firm I was interviewing at was really close landing an associate role. They said, we like you, we want to hire you, and then something changed, and they said, sorry, actually, we're going to go in a different path. I'm like, okay, well, why? And and so they said, we really like your background. You've got a lot of great public company experience, within semis. However, you don't know what it's like to sit across the table from us as a startup founder, as someone that's worked within startups at within smaller types of companies. And so I think it was great advice at the time. Like, I always reflect back on that and think that, if you work at a startup and gain some more experience, and that's going to pay dividends too along the way of if you really want to pursue being a VC later in your career. And so the VC actually gave amazing advice. Was that he said, you should go, given your background, because I was working at a few different semiconductor companies in industry, and there's a few luminaries, of course, from that industry, and one of them, his name is Andy Bechtolsheim, and Andy had co-founded Sun Microsystems. He was one of the early angel investors into Google, writing I think either like 100K check to Larry and Sergey. Who knows how much that's valued now? But and so he said, you should go find an opportunity to go work with Andy Bechtolsheim somehow. And so that really led to my next opportunity. So because I pursued a job with a startup called Fulcrum Microsystems. And Fulcrum makes Ethernet switch chips for all different types of industries, mostly for low latency type of financial services markets, like high frequency trading was starting to become a big thing back then too. So I moved over from being in more of an engineering role to now being more in a business and sales role with Fulcrum Microsystems, because Fulcrum was the chip company for Arista Networks, which is the company Andy Bechtolsheim had founded as well later on in his career. So I'm like, that's actually great advice. Like, so I'll go work at Fulcrum and I'll get, more exposure to some of these amazing types of luminaries and entrepreneurs like Andy. And so that alone was a phenomenal job because I got to work at a startup and it was a very small, energetic team. And so this is where I was calling on early cloud companies. There wasn't even really the word cloud yet, if I'm dating myself again. So, calling on Facebook, flying up to Seattle to call on Amazon, Microsoft, and then of course Cisco and all the other types of networking companies that we're trying to sell our chip to. So that experience led to Intel acquiring Fulcrum. And so I had moved into now large Intel and thinking, how am I going to kind of work through this? I really like just working at a less than 100-person type of startup, and now there's tens of thousands of people. Like, how is this going to really work? Am I going to enjoy it? And so I'll pause there because I can get into more of the Intel story. But that transition and hearing some advice, really great advice when you didn't get the job, you should always ask like some advice, like, okay, what do you think I could do better, or what would you recommend I do? And obviously I took that to heart to make that type of move later on in my career, which we'll get to.
So on that note, like first of all, crazy that they gave you like a specific person that you should go and work for. Even crazier that you managed to find, like, how do you do that aspect of it in a way?
Yeah, it was pretty wild because it was somebody that I'd already had interacted with, having worked at a previous large networking semiconductor company in Broadcom, and so so of course I knew who Andy Bechtolsheim was, that founded just one of these just names in the valley, like, that are just kind of spoken about, like, all the amazing companies that they founded and had exits with, and just the genius of him too. So that was fantastic because Fulcrum was really not on the radar for a lot of people too, and so it was just a great opportunity then to go and work for a really fun company and extremely talented people. It came out of Caltech, really. Some real specific technology out of a PhD program at Caltech, and then just were able to build a really successful small franchise around it that Intel had acquired. So, but yeah, it was getting to Intel though was a whole nother kind of like wow moment, because it's just huge, right? Some people call it the Borgs. It's just so many, and they have such a history, of course, in Silicon Valley with Moore's Law and microprocessors and all the other aspects of it too. So I got there and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this here. Like, I like being in a startup. And so a couple things that I learned while I was there. One, where it was, Intel has a venture arm called Intel Capital, where they invest in startups, they do corporate development, they do partnership work. That's all a lot of it's being handled out of this venture arm of Intel's. And the other was this really amazing role I discovered while I was there. So I moved in and I was working in business development, but I was thinking, how do I up-level this career within Intel? It's so big. And someone told me, you should really think about this role called a technical assistant role, or a chief of staff. And like, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. All right. So a TA, technical assistant, operates with the VP or the executive, and as really an extension of he or she. And so you work in operations, you work in business development, you interface with finance, you interface with product engineering, you interface with other divisions at Intel as well. And so I felt this sounds really appealing because it's going to up level my career even more, move out of, now that I've worked in business development, I've worked in some engineering and product. I'd love to get more experience, exposure of being an operator. And so I was able to find an opportunity to land as a TA for Intel's data center software division. And this was a startup division within Intel's larger multi-billion-dollar data center group, where Intel sells and data center processors, network equipment, or networking chips, etc. And that was pretty exciting because here I moved into this new role, and it wasn't about semiconductors anymore. It was about enterprise software, infrastructure software, more moving up the stack, if you will, in that time frame, because cloud became, at that moment, was starting to really take off. And so this was selling into cloud. It was selling products into cloud, selling into big data analytics, high performance computing infrastructure. So massive exposure for me of all these new technologies and all these new areas within Intel to start operating with. And so that was like a 2-year type of leadership, acceleration training role. And so for me, that set up a few things. One was I started interfacing more with the capital side, because we were a startup. We were like looking at who can we go and acquire, right? And who can we actually invest in, different ecosystems. And so I started getting to know the Intel capital side of the house pretty regularly. And after Intel decided it was time, they had gone through another CEO transition at that time, moving from Paul Ortolini to Brian Krzanich. And BK, as we called him, wasn't really a very focused software guy. He was more manufacturing. And so he decided he didn't want to continue on with these different software businesses. And so he shut down our business. And so it was perfect time for me to make yet a new move. Because usually as a TA, you finish your role and then you land in your VP's organization and you start working.
I would assume, yeah.
Right? So that was like my thinking at the time, right? But then all of a sudden my VP left. But luckily, mentors are really important. It's probably a good time to mention that. So the CEO at Fulcrum, his name's Bob Nunn. Has been always a fantastic mentor of mine. He had moved from a role within Intel's data center group to Intel Capital. And so, great opportunity. So I moved back to continue to work for Bob inside Intel Capital, into more of a corporate development type of role. And now I'm in Intel Capital. I'm learning the ropes, right? Seeing all these different startups, investments, potential for acquisitions. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really know finance. Like I really don't understand how these transactions are really working, right? How are these companies being valued, right? I had all the hard skills and soft skills in other areas, but finance wasn't one of them. And so I looked around and I said, okay, well, where did you go to get your MBA? Where'd you? And everyone's like, Wharton, right? And so I'm like, okay, maybe Wharton sounds like a great idea. And so Wharton has as you're aware, probably many do on this show, radio show. No, Wharton has an executive MBA program both in Philadelphia as well in San Francisco. And so it was a perfect way for me to now go back to school yet again and to pursue an MBA through Wharton's executive MBA program in Philadelphia and San Francisco. So I'd gone back at that time part-time for to back to school with a focus on majoring in finance and just consuming as much financial type of coursework as I could while I was there. And so ultimately did the MBA from 2015 to 2017 and came out. Now I'm like, all right, now I'm ready to go take on the world of new transactions and really understanding corporate development and what is a discounted cash flow analysis. I know that now, and all these kind of things, right? And that was really exciting for me because it really opened up more possibilities about where my career could go. And so sure enough, within Intel Capital, that's why it's such an amazing learning ground to work within Intel Capital, because you get exposed to so many different types of deals, from equity investing to M&A type of deals to partnerships and licensings and all the strategy work and whatnot. And so I leveraged that work for doing these different types of deals, but I gravitated slowly more to what I've always wanted to do, was to venture investing and working with startups and working more with early stage companies. And luckily I was able to do that. And so I made a few different investments. I had exposure working with AI, ML, and in areas of deep learning, investing into areas of, let's see, it was emerging technologies. So I worked with the drone ecosystem was really popping at that time. There was Intel Sports. There was other areas of Intel's infrastructure and networking that I had exposure to. So it was a great time. It's just a great platform to work and to really just build my career from. And ultimately, that's really where it kind of led to the next transition of my career, with thinking now, okay, I'd love to continue doing this, but I think for me, I was ready to move on from Intel Capital, and try to go and lead something and build more, find out how to get go into a venture firm or something of that sort. And yet, again, I leaned on my network of people for just really some insights and just some different areas of connections and learnings. And so one angel investor I had met in this process, a guy named Dan Scheinman. Dan was one of the first checks into Zoom. And so he was also on the board of Zoom, and he was on the board. He previously ran corporate development for Cisco, but he was also on the board at Arista Networks. And so Dan and I met up, and I told him I was thinking about making some transitions, if he had any ideas for my career. And he goes, well, it's not exactly what you want to do going into venture, but I think you'd be really good at this role. And this was the head of corporate development role for Arista Networks. And he's like, Jay Shree, Andy Bechtolsheim. I'm like, of course, I know Andy. Like, Andy's been so influential in my career arc. And it's amazing how it kind of came full circle too at that moment. So Dan reconnected me with Jay Shree. Really the next step was one of the fun stories just Jay Shree is so dear to me as well, is when we interviewed over frozen yogurt. And so we went and had a froyo locally. And so it's just more, she's very personal and wants to get to know you. How she's going to be able to work with you. So I got to have that experience, and so we had our froyo, and we decided this is going to be a great fit for each other to work together. So I left Intel Capital to go join Arista Networks as the head of corporate development. And she was also looking for somebody to head up investor relations. And I said, well, she's like, you'd be a really good fit with that. You're very, you're personable. You're extroverted. You can communicate well, with different technical audiences and financial audiences as well. Like, that sounds fun. I'm like, I'm up for it. I'm like, so I'm up for always a new challenge from that standpoint too. So yeah, so I experienced working at Arista, and I tell you, I had a moment when I was interviewing for the job. I was sitting across from Andy Bechtolsheim, and I was definitely trying to not have such a fanboy moment right during my interview. I was trying to you're not that young kid anymore. So you got to be very professional. But it was fantastic. So I got this opportunity to work with them, and we did a few deals, as you mentioned, with Big Switch and Awake, and some other areas as well for investment, and which ultimately led to Third Point Ventures. So this was like the COVID era. So I made that was my COVID era job. I left Intel, October of 2019.
Like, COVID's too boring already. I've got to have some excitement, and then you swap to a new job just for COVID.
Yes, yeah. I felt like it was a great opportunity, and something that I was always extremely passionate about, which was becoming, an investor full time. Yeah, so I'm on 4 boards right now. So I've invested in 2 cybersecurity companies, a data operations automation company, and as well as into deep tech, into a quantum computing company. And so really enjoy investing in a variety of different types of technology landscapes.
Your story is very crazy, because you had this goal that you wanted to get into this whole world of investing and venture. and then you went one whole circle in a sense to see everything in kind of the venture space before you kind of got to the actual place that you wanted to be. When we talk about it now, it seems very very like almost like you were following some path that you can see forward of. But I'm
Yeah,
sure it wasn't when you were going through that. So what actually helped you or
yeah.
enabled you to keep moving towards that goal, even though the opportunities weren't exactly like linearly connected in a way, because
That's
you
right.
don't
Yeah.
know, kind of like
It-
looking forward that this would lead to this and that would lead to this and bring you where you
I,
wanted to go.
I never did. Yeah, I never did. You're right. Like I think always being curious and always trying to network and find a great opportunity where there's a strong fit. And for me personally, with the organization, with the people, was always something that drove me. And so, I'd say always being proactively and out meeting more people, getting to know the firm, what they're looking for, and seeing if there's a great fit for with your skill set and what you can with what you have to offer. And so I think for when I was at Intel Capital, I had a goal of really, meeting many venture firms and trying. That's how you generate new deal flow and source new deal flow as well, is like trying to find, okay, where are all the top firms on Sand Hill investing, and seeing if there's opportunities to, because we were, at that time looking to follow on and follow on investments or being a part of larger roles. And that helped because I started building somewhat of a network in that way too. But yeah, it really, the the wanting to try something new and believing in yourself, that it's not being afraid, also not being afraid to fail, is something that's kind of driven me as well. So, and there's been many times, like I've had plenty of interviews out there that didn't go my way, and so you just always kind of learns from that, and you just realize it wasn't a fit for a certain type for a reason. But there's always more and more opportunities. So I've just kept a real optimistic type of positive type of outlook, and pursued that, and that hasn't changed over time.
And I'm very curious, that outlook of being able to, you know, do the repetitive work that leads to success. Like you mentioned, earlier in your journey, much earlier when you were, I think selling the chips, you had to call all of these big companies. You had to do that.
Exactly.
Then you get into a venture role like much later in your career where you're essentially managing investor relations. You have to find you have to again kind of have that pitch and that sales. You have to look at deal flow. How do you kind of look like all of this is very like similar in theory but very different in application,
That's
or
right.
maybe different in theory and similar in application depending on how you look at it. What are the kind of the skills that you took away like this from the journey that you learned in one area but helped you in another area of your career?
Yeah, I think being removing any sort of I'd say if you have like an imposter syndrome about you, right? Like that's one thing. It's like just if you're not familiar with imposter syndrome or whatnot, but like it's you definitely, everybody feels like they don't necessarily belong, and they're but it's not true. You're meant to be where you are today, just as you are doing such a fabulous job in this radio show. So that's something I had to get over early in my career as well, and just know that everyone's learning and everyone's trying to improve uh, in what they're doing. Nobody is like this amazing, perfect expert for for role. They build and grow from their failures as well as the areas that they do quite well, and lean into those areas they do quite well. So I found ways that I thought like what I should lean into and where I can also improve areas I don't do quite well, like learning, how to use a discounted cash flow model, right? That was something I had to learn because, but to your point, it is trying to find out where a bit about where you can improve about yourself and that type of skill set. So that's probably I'd say what's really helped me, and just honestly keeping a positive attitude over time, and just that is something really you want to work with people that are very positive as well, and try to keep that type of model. Yeah.
But when and I really like that that whole kind of in like counter to imposter syndrome kind of like argument in a way. And one
Yeah,
of the things that that is very fascinating is today you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. You work with a lot of
right,
people who, and you probably see hundreds, if not thousands, of these people like
right.
throughout your career. What do you look for, like because you have such varied kind of experiences? What actually do you think makes or break an entrepreneur? Is it the technical expertise? Is it that ability to kind of get over the internal blocks in your mind, or is it a combination of multiple different things? Is it a finance background? What do you think makes or breaks a
Yeah,
successful entrepreneur in this world where
yeah.
90% of us are
I
destined to
know.
fail anyway? Yeah.
Gosh, there's so much, it really depends. I mean, but I think what makes or breaks is like your confidence in yourself and your belief in yourself. Like if you have that strong belief in that you can go and pursue and not listen to all the noise, because entrepreneurs are going to hear no more than they're going to hear yes across their career, right? From investors and somebody that doesn't understand their story or understand the product or doesn't believe in them. So it's important to like clearly have that level of belief in yourself, and then also have that discipline, and how your focus and on building and growing from. So I'd say technical founders, just you always want to just continue to like have that level of of expectation for yourself, and not let that bar drop at all, and just build, because investors want to see that confidence. They want to see that you're going to be someone that is going to take them right from 0 to 100, and that's important, right? And it's not an easy skill set to have too, but that's one area. But it's just being an expert in your domain. I think that's the other aspect of it. As well as you can understand, is it fintech? Is it AI ML? Is it something different? Show that you have that expertise, and that's what investors want to. They want to invest into and back the best. So I think that's another important attribute.
Definitely. And we spoke earlier a little bit about, that that managing kind of that fear and that in kind of a career story. But I also
Right.
wanted to hear, in this startup ecosystem, because tech is something that is so volatile, not just now, but like generally in a sense, because there's no world where it's not evolving in a way. So there's
Right.
no hope. So it's always moving in a sense. And as a tech entrepreneur myself, nowhere near your stage, but as a tech entrepreneur myself,
Yeah.
what I often hear is people go around saying like, this is the end of this industry, this is the end of that industry in a sense. And
Yeah.
everyone is there's always a lot of fear, and people like worrying like it's a bad time for the economy, it's a bad time to be a tech entrepreneur, it's a bad time to be this. And I've heard this for like the last 1 year, so I'm beginning to think like, when is a good time to be in any industry at this point? But my question to you is, how do you not let all of the noise that's happening outside there affect you? Because you are on one side making investment decisions, but also on the other side you have had that experience of being in the startup shoes as well. So how
Right.
do you essentially kind of not, I wouldn't say block out the noise, but kind of surf the noise so that you stay above it?
Yeah, I think, well, one, you should stay off Twitter. That's probably that can be very. There's a lot of noise on Twitter, but no, I mean, but there is a lot of great insights too. So I think it's a matter of who you find that you should be listening to. So probably one thing there, Harsha, is who are your mentors and who are the people that you look up to and you want to receive input from and advice from. So establishing that type of core network is going to be extremely important for a founder, as you need to have those advisors early in your career that you can lean into and ask the dumb questions and not feel like you're going to be embarrassed by asking about what is a discounted cash flow model. But no, you know what I mean? Like it's important to really find those voices that you appreciate and that will give you a bit that aren't going to be your echo chamber, because that's the worst thing you could have, is just a bunch of people saying you're the best, and nobody's really telling it to you straight. And that's what you really want to find, those types of people around you, and then try to block out the rest of the noise. Like just people, that's always part of it as well. Is just staying very focused and just believing in what you're building, and then taking that selective type of approach to people that will give you really great advice and mentorship along the way. So mentoring is something we all need, and it's always there. You just have to find those people willing to provide it.
Okay, really sound. I'll go and give my mentors an extra hug and an extra cup of coffee, for dealing with me for the last couple of months.
Yeah, no, it's good. I can imagine you have a great set of people that you're able to talk to a lot. So would like to be one of those people one day too. So that's fantastic.
Thank you. And as we wind down this interview, I think there's so much that I can learn from you, that our audience can learn from you, that I think all my friends interested in investing would kill me if I didn't ask at least one question, about how you basically kind of built your network, because
Yeah,
you essentially see all of these different aspects of it now. But for
right,
those of us who are at the point where you are, where you wanted to be in this industry, you wanted to be in the investment and venture space in a sense, but you weren't there yet, and you had a huge career around it that brought
right.
you there.
Yeah,
We can't see that for ourselves right now. We know we need the network, we know we need to do that, but what's the first step in a sense to getting there?
yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, LinkedIn wasn't around when I was in college. Okay, like, so I mean, those things all happened, obviously, in the last couple decades, right? But anyway, I think you have to be you just continue to think about how to be proactive about building out the network, and so I've been in roles that allowed me to network, right? Being in a startup and being in business development. I think, you know, sales is obviously, a very, very smart thing to actually have as part of your experience. And so learn how to sell, learn how to grow, learn how to build your network and work with others. And I think that's really important to do, of course. So for me, yeah, I mean, having, you have LinkedIn's fantastic and whatnot, but then it's about building out that ecosystem within, where I'm at within Silicon Valley. So knowing, right, having a great set of other investors that I can go and go talk to, great mentors, and great corporate type of leaders that I can lean on as well. I think those are all important aspects. And also looking back, at academia, having a great university, behind, on my side, like Penn or like Purdue. So there's just a lot of resources over time that you build up. You don't think you're building it up at the time, but like you look back and you're like, wow, I mean, that's fantastic. Like, I've got a great set of people that I can really follow up with. Yeah, I mean, moving careers and moving jobs, doing it in the right way, never burning bridges is really important too. So I think it's always important, if you're going to go and move, whether you're moving to a competitor, doing things ethically, doing things the right way. People will appreciate and respect you for it, even if they're not happy that you left to go to a competitor, right? But you have to, like, always be smart about how you're doing that and thinking about that type of perception too. But that's been important. I've tried to make sure, when I make changes, that it's for the best and that people understand why, and just communicating that is helping me over time.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This interview has been very, very insightful, and I think just listening to your journey will probably inspire a lot more people to take a little bit of effort, expand their network,
Yeah,
plan out where they want to do, and be very intentional with the experiences that they're crafting for themselves. So I
right.
really appreciate it. Final words of wisdom for our audience before we end for today.
Yeah, I think, it's a long road. That's when I can, from where you are today, just know, like, enjoy every moment. College is a fantastic place to be. And so build your great relationships that you have with your classmates, with your professors, because it's going to be important down the road when, you want to look back and, you're thinking about these changes and you're like, hey, I know somebody, and so in this industry, or this professor I used to go to school with. So just keep all those things in mind, because it's going to really help you down the road from a different type of career change. You never know who's going to be there for you. It's going to open a door for you, and that one opportunity might lead to something fantastic. So that's probably my good parting words there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I think our audience definitely enjoyed listening to you as well. So
It's so
thank you.
fun, Harsha. Thank you for inviting me on the show too. It's really
I
great.
know
You got a
you've been on
great
your speaking
platform here.
tour
It's so
recently,
impressive.
so appreciate you making the stop on our show. And
You bet. You bet. Look forward to keeping in touch. And but yeah, have a great rest of the day. And yeah, thanks again. It's been a lot of fun and an honor to be here. Appreciate it.
likewise, thank you. And with that, I guess our show today has come to a wrap. To our audience, thank you for listening as well. And as always, this has been Changing Reality. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.